Probably the best place to start your studies of FRAs is right at the end of the timeline by seeing how to calculate the settlement amount. This example is based on a 2x5 FRA on a notional amount of 10 million Rand and with a fixed rate of 6%. We are going to calculate the settlement amount as well as indicating who pays whom given an expiration spot rate of 6.8%. All rates are based on the Johannesburg interbank rate, which is a simple interest money market rate. We assume that the 3360 day count convention applies. Because this example is focused on what is happening at expiration date for this derivative, we are not interested in this example in the 2 months prior to that date. We are instead focused on the 3-month accrual period that begins at expiration date and ends at maturity date. We are also going to need an understanding of the obligations of the counterparties to an FRA. As usual with the derivative, it is easiest to adopt the point of view of the long. All calculations can then be made once only because the short's position is always equal but opposite to those of the long. For an FRA, the long is the floating rate receiver and the fixed rate payer. We have been given the floating rate at expiration, which is 6.8%, and the fixed rate is, of course, the price of the FRA at 6%. The calculations are driven by an understanding of how an FRA works. The economic reality is that interest accrues after the applicable time has passed. So, in theory, the interest received by the long on the floating rate and paid on the fixed rate should happen only at maturity date. But that is inconvenient because by that stage the derivative will have expired long ago and the counterparties will have gone their separate ways. In fact, all the required information is available at expiration date to calculate the cash flows that will happen at the future maturity date. This means that the FRA counterparties can settle the derivative at expiration date. Although this might look like interest payments being made in advance, it is not. It is possible because the interest rates that will apply for the entire duration of the accrual period become fixed at expiration date, which is also the beginning of that accrual period. Let's begin by calculating the floating and fixed legs of the FRA. On maturity date, the long will become entitled to receive an amount calculated as the notional deposit of 10 million Rand times the ruling interest rate on the floating leg, which is 6.8%, times the simple interest time fraction, which is 90 divided by 360. We calculate that this receipt will be 170,000 Rand. Then, the long's fixed leg payment obligation on maturity date will be the fixed interest rate of 6% multiplied by the same notional amount and the same simple interest time fraction. The result is a payment of 150,000 Rand. Notice that although these cash flows are due for transfer between the long and the short only on maturity date, the exact amount that will happen is already known with certainty at expiration date. After offsetting the two amounts, this is a net receipt of 20,000 Rand by the long. This certainty creates the opportunity for the commercial convenience of settling in advance at expiration date. All that is required is to determine the present value of the 20,000 Rand. This is done on the same simple interest and 360 convention as before. Because the 3-month market rate at expiration date is the floating rate of 6.8%, it is that rate which should be used in the TVM calculation and not the FRA's fixed rate.